The new Dark Angel Codex is now out in the wild, not quite in our hands just yet, but from the reviews and such, we know pretty much the full contents, and I think it's fair to say it's been quite a bit of a disappointment for a lot of Dark Angel fans. Certainly, it doesn't seem particularly powerful, with a few massive nerfs to key units, but for me, as a not really competitive tournament player, I would say that my personal feelings towards it are definitely more in line with disappointment rather than the anger that I see from a lot of sort of more competitive Dark Angel players. I don't really care that much about the admittedly, frankly awful point costings in the book, because that should all get fixed and balanced out in upcoming data slates and field manuals. The big thing for me is that a lot of the units in this codex just feel less. They feel incomplete or diminished, and the ways that GW have changed them just make them less fun and less lore friendly, and they just have changed in so many ways for the worse, which has been detrimental for me to like the overall feel and enjoyment I have towards the faction. And so today what I wanted to do is go through 5 changes and 5 units in this codex which, yes, admittedly they are bad because of the horrendous points costings, some of them are borderline unplayable, but more than that, 5 units which I just think feel very much less fun and exciting and thematic for Dark Angel players right now, and units that, even if they end up getting halved in price, will still be, whilst possibly good from a usability standpoint competitively, still just lacking in that cool Dark Angels feel factor. And I'm also going to preface this by saying I'm not going to talk about the removed units. Obviously they are in themselves massive disappointments in this book, but I want to talk about my issues with the datasheets that are present. So whilst I will and do miss the Strike Master, the Talon Master, the Deathwing Command Squad, that is almost certainly a video for another day. With that in mind, let's jump in, and yes, as I said, most of these are already bad from a points perspective too, but nothing jumps out quite as much to me as the Deathwing Knights. These guys are massively overpriced, currently at 290 points for 5, but my big problem with them is their weapons, which even at half the cost, just don't feel like I think they should. Now let me just say, I'm not saying Deathwing Knights should be half the cost, I'm just saying I want their weapons to actually match a price that makes sense for them, and right now, they just don't. Deathwing Knights can take swords or maces, both being iconic, stylish choices for the unit, and they both do look incredibly cool. But from a rules perspective, they both just kinda suck. Their swords are just power weapons, they bring you 5 attacks which hit on 2s, they're strength 6, minus 2 AP, but just 1 damage, whilst the maces are 4 attacks, again they do hit on 2s, but they're still only strength 6, minus 1, and they've been dropped down to 2 damage, so the maces have lost a whole point of damage, while the swords do half as much damage as even something like a Blade Guard Veteran power sword. And at nearly twice the cost of a Blade Guard Veteran, you can essentially get 8 strength 5, minus 2 AP, 2 damage attacks hitting on 3s for the same price as 5 strength 6, minus 2 AP, 1 damage attacks from the Knights, and it just blows my mind that for an elite, meant to be heavy hitting, durable unit, they made their attacks so wimpy. I would happily pay more. I mean, I'm not saying I would pay 290 points for this, but I would probably pay a bit more than their current index price for 2 damage swords or 3 damage maces. Then they could really fit that role of being this premier melee unit for the Deathwing, this small, hyper elite, hyper strong unit that could just wade into the enemy, kicking ass all over the place, and then surviving anything the opponent can throw back at them. I want Deathwing Knights to do that and be able to do that, and if it costs a bit more, then so be it. But what I don't want is for them to have weedy weapons and just get pointed down until they are like takeable, but are just stuck with those crappy weapons. Points adjustments are great ways to fix armies, don't get me wrong, but some units should be elite and should be expensive, and I just wish GW knew how to make them worth that value. If you're going to price them at 290 points, make them worth 290 points, and 1 damage swords and 2 damage maces aren't that. In a similar vein, the brand new Inner Circle Companions, again, gorgeous new models, and I want them to be strong and elite and, if necessary, pricey, but as it stands right now, they are currently more expensive than Blade Guard Veterans and just flat out worse. Again, it's not that I want GW to reduce their price. If they became 25 points per model for a min squad costing you 75 points, would I take them over Blade Guard Veterans? Quite possibly yes, but that's not necessarily what I want. They have Calibanite greatswords, and those swords just don't feel great with their current profile. They either have 4 attacks at strength 6, -1 AP, 2 damage with lethal hits, or 4 attacks at strength 6, -1 AP, 1 damage with sustained hits too. And I just can't help but think that even at 25 points per model, whilst they may be worth bringing then from a competitive standpoint, it still doesn't feel like you're going to be bringing a fun unit. You've still got AP1 swords, which is such a big downside. This is meant to be a hard-hitting melee unit. Having AP1 on them just doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up from how they're meant to be in the fluff and the lore in the background to how they are represented on the table. Their great swords feel like they're going to be made of foam with AP1. I also think that the squad size GW have done for them doesn't really make sense either, and is another point of disappointment. They are a 3 or a 6-man squad, which just feels awkward when they are also a unit that, more than almost anything in the game, wants to be joined by a character, not just from their rules themselves, but I mean their name. They are companions. They are named for having a character with them. And with that squad size, it just makes them awkward. Joining a character to 3 just feels rather anemic and pointless, whilst joining a squad to 6, whilst that feels better, you can't put them in vehicles like impulsors or other things like that, and it just makes them frustrating to play. If they were 5 strong with a character to make them 6 strong, that to me would just make them feel and play so much better, and with some slightly improved rules on their swords, again, even if that made them end up pricier than Blade Guard, I would pay it because it would make them feel like they're meant to, and you would play them and have fun knowing that these huge man-sized swords are actually doing what you kind of want them to do looking at the models. Right now that just doesn't align to me, and so it makes me really disappointed and not want to use them. Especially the strike profile. Like, if you are striking an enemy with a massive man-sized sword, doing lethal hits and 2 damage a swing, the fact that it's still only AP1, it just absolutely blows my mind that GW thought that was an acceptable sort of way to design them. The next disappointment for me is again a purely weapons perspective one, but this one really annoys me because of the sheer scale of it. The Land Speed of Vengeance with its Plasma Storm battery, which is pretty much 2 Terminator-sized plasma cannons, got reduced to 1 damage and 2 damage on the overcharge. Now, I don't care if they make this thing 20 points. Yes, it will be massively OP and spammed to high heaven if they did, but to me that still doesn't make sense that you've got a 1 or 2 damage Plasma Storm battery. How is a vehicle with such a huge weapon platform on the back the same overcharge damage as a plasma pistol? I just really don't understand how GW thought from a lore, a fluff, a simple logic perspective that was an appropriate change. If you think the 2 or 3 damage profile is too strong, bump the points up. Don't just absolutely destroy the feel and the idea of the vehicle, which is having this big, strong plasma battery on the back. Inceptors having 2 to 3 damage plasma, Redemptors still having 2 to 3 damage plasma, whilst this gets smacked down to 1 or 2 on the overcharge. Again, it's just utterly mind-blowing to me. I don't care that this makes it uncompetitive because, as I said, points can change everything. I just care about the logic and the backstory and the feel of the unit, and the Vengeance to me should have big, powerful plasma. Like, it's half the back of the bloody speeder is a plasma cannon. So by all means, make us pay for it. Just make the unit fun to use and make sense with what you are looking at on the table. Because if you look at that, you would think that's a clearly, 2 or 3 or 4 damage plasma, because it's so big. You don't think, yeah, that's probably the same damage as a plasma pistol or a plasma gun. It just makes the unit less fun to play with. And that's something that no codex should do to any units in any army. If your codex is making players that own a unit less excited to use it, then you have failed in your codex, in my opinion. The Lion is up next, and yes, he is still painfully overpriced. He was overpriced before the codex, he still is now, in spite of the tiny points drop he got, mainly because his rules got gutted. But again, to me, it's just a feels bad and doesn't match his fluff, which is where my main issues are. It doesn't match his presence in the story of 40k, if you will. He has the Emperor's Shield, which of course, in my opinion, should give that 3-up invuln, but there is, to me, no reason it shouldn't also give that -1 to be wounded that he had before. Again, if it was proving too strong, readjust, repoint, maybe change it to make it -1 to hit to represent the fact that it's, a shield or something. But the fact that they just got rid of it completely, and now that shield just does the 3-up invuln as well as the mortal wound reflection, it just diminishes that bit of war gear as an artifact and as a rule and as a piece of narrative. Like, that is the Emperor's Shield. It should do something extra instead of just a 3-up invuln and that mortal wound reflection. Like, I don't care if you have to rebalance him and make him, a point cost that is worth it, but it just feels like he's got a slightly better Storm Shield now, which the Emperor's Shield, fluff-wise, lore-wise, and narrative-wise, shouldn't just be. The same thing goes for his sword fealty, not regarding the fact, like rules-wise, that the Avatar, the Catan, the Angron, even Guilliman still have 2 damage on their sweep-style profiles, and the Lion has now been dropped to 1. The issue to me is that his sword should be cleaving through Marines in one go. 2 damage on the sweep profile makes sense for that sword. It's his sword. He's a Primarch. He should be able to cut through Marines like butter. I mean, if you think the sword is too powerful, dropping the damage on the sweep profile is, I think, the absolute worst way to rebalance it, because it functionally changes how he performs and the idea of him. The idea that his sword, as he swings it, now cannot cut a Marine in half in one blow, it's just stupid to me. It makes him feel lesser as a character because of it. And I'll say, to be clear, I'm not complaining he's overpriced or underpowered. I'm not making that my complaint, although he certainly is. It's just that that drop to 1 damage changes how you envision him on the battlefield, how he is thematically on the battlefield. And that, as the kind of player that I am, is a huge issue to me. Even at 100 points, it would still feel odd to me that his sword was 1 damage. Yes, again, like the Vengeance, he may be OP and brought every single game, but I would still, even as I was playing him, in the back of my head think, fealty shouldn't just be 1 damage. Like, that doesn't make sense for a Primarch's sword. The final mind-boggling change for me is the Deathwing Terminator squad. And from a pure points and rules perspective, these, I think, are arguably the closest in this list to being right that we have. They are very similar to Marine Terminators, with a few extra buffs put in. They have access to a Watcher and the slightly improved Deathwing rule, which gives them the +1 to hit against oath targets and the ability to ignore modifiers. So I think points-wise and rules-wise, these aren't necessarily the most disappointing change in this book. But from a fluff, background, thematic, army identity point of view, the Deathwing Terminators are possibly the worst change in this codex. Deathwing has, for certainly almost as long as I've been a Dark Angel player, which is a long time now, been the faction with customizable Terminators. You can mix and match the Stormbolter variants with Lightning Claws and Thunder Hammers. Being able to take a Cyclone missile launcher on a Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminator was, to me, such a cool, iconic part of being a Dark Angel player, and it gave you that sense of identity and uniqueness, and to me that's really what it was. You felt like you had a uniqueness in your army that made you slightly different to other Marine factions. It made your Terminators just stand out that little bit more. That is now all gone. You can still take a plasma cannon, but all of the melee options are gone. It's not like you can't still bring an Assault Terminator squad. Obviously you can still do that, but no more can you bring a Thunderhammer Storm Shield Sergeant, a Terminator with an Assault Cannon, a couple of Terminators with Lightning Claws, and then a Terminator with a Stormbolter and Chain Fist to bring up the rear. That choice and that customization is now just completely gone. And to me, that is a monumental shame, not least from the fact that a lot of players, myself included, are now going to have awkward, possibly illegal squads on their shelves. So from the point of feeling like a Dark Angel player, feeling like a Deathwing player with a unique identity in how your Terminators go to battle, we've just lost some of our identity, and that, it hurts. It sucks really, really badly. As I've always said before, I'm usually quite positive. I don't like to complain about things. I'm normally upbeat about most things, and I will reiterate, points-wise, every single unit we've mentioned here could be made S tier by tomorrow. If they dropped Knights down to 175 points, bam, there you go, they'll be in every list. If you drop the Lion to 200 points, bam, there you go, he'll be in every list. It's just, to me, as a non-competitive tournament player, that still wouldn't make them feel like they should. This codex, to me, is guilty of one big thing, and that is gutting a huge part of the Dark Angels' identity. Whether that's from Lionel not feeling quite like he should as a Primarch, whether that's to the Vengeance not feeling like a big plasma platform like it should anymore, to the Terminators just being completely destroyed in terms of how they should feel as Deathwing, not to mention the fact that although I said I wasn't going to talk about them, the removal of things like the Talon Master and the Strike Master and the Deathwing Command Squad really removes another huge portion of the Dark Angels' identity. There is just so much in this codex that even if you don't consider points or balance or tournaments, it just lessens the thematic feel and the enjoyment that I personally get from running a Dark Angel army. So sorry about this video, it has been a bit odd, and as I said, I don't like to complain, it's just this codex has upset me more than I thought it would, just because I feel there is less to be excited about as a Dark Angel player than there was a couple of weeks ago. But as always, I'd really love to know what you think. What do you feel about this codex, aside from the points? I don't really want to get hinged up on the points because they could change, but just about the feel and the theme of this codex. How do you feel about it? Do you like it, or has the removal of things like the Talon Master, the mixed Terminator squads, and the strange choices to things like the Lion's Sword made you also lose that bit of excitement for the book? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.